glad you could make it today. Thank you for coming in from all over the country, wherever you happen to come from. Welcome, welcome. Lovely to see all you, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. So grab a seat because we're about to get started. But first off, who am I? Well, simply put, my name is Brandon. I love Ruby, and I'm here to share that with you today. I've been programming Ruby since 2004, if you believe it, with RPG Maker XP of all things. And several companies thereafter, from a wireless ISP back in a small town in Missouri, to Cerner, to PlayStation, to Square, to Gusto. I was there for a few years even. And finally, currently, to where I'm at Amazon, where I'm working under One Medical and Amazon Healthcare. Now, do note that my words are my own, and today I'm here as myself speaking independently. Now, you can also follow along and ask questions in the Slack channel, Brandon Weaver, We Who Remember Magic, and all of the talks today are going to have corresponding Slack channels. Though, forgive me for not live replying while I'm up here because I'm not quite that talented, and I can only do one thing at a time. With that said, shall we go ahead and get started? The first magic. So let me take you back to a bygone day, back to the advent of Rails, when those of us who remember what felt like magic that might be real. We came from all walks of life. I mean, artists, teachers, philosophers, musicians. It didn't really matter, did it? We all saw that video of making a blog in 15 minutes and something clicked. We thought we might be able to do the same. And we thought maybe we too could become some of those programmers. We witnessed magic, but more importantly, we felt it was within our grasp. What once felt impossible now felt very real, very near. We gained the ability to manifest our dreams into reality. The barrier to entry had been lowered. People who had never considered themselves programmers found themselves building very real applications. The learning curve that took months was compressed into days. The infrastructure that once required teams of enterprise architects could be managed by an individual on Heroku with a simple command. Hobby projects went live over a weekend. Entire businesses emerged from a single developer. And what many considered beyond us now felt very, very attainable. So attainable, in fact, that VCs began to notice that there was something electric in the air at this point. Rails exploded in the Y Combinator and other VC funds, dominating the tech stack for years in rankings. And over time, some of the companies even went on to be worth billions and billions of dollars. This wasn't just about faster development. It was about democratization and the ability to build. Suddenly, having an idea was enough. You didn't need a computer science degree. You didn't need years of enterprise experience. You didn't need to understand the intricacies of J2EE development. You just needed curiosity and determination. Why did this happen? Well, I believe it's because Ruby's focused first and foremost on happiness, and Rails catalyzed that happiness into a tool to manifest our visions into the world, into reality, in a way that had never really felt possible before. Mats designed Ruby with a very simple philosophy. It was to make programmers happy. Not the computer, not the compiler, not the enterprise architecture team, the human being, you, sitting in here in this room, sitting at a keyboard trying to solve a problem. This was unheard of in a world dominated by languages that seemed designed to make simple things complicated. It was, in a word, revolutionary, and its echoes can still be felt in even the newest and most emerging frameworks. Over time, those who really loved Ruby and Rails found each other, and one became many, and many became a community, welcomed all, no matter where you happen to come from. Empathy, inclusion, and diversity, and taking care of each other were values this community embodied. Now, the conferences weren't just about technical talks. They were about people. The IRC channels, for those of you who remember that, weren't just about code. They were about helping each other grow. And those open source projects, they weren't just about features. They were about mentorship and collaboration. When I first started Ruby, I started with Ruby. And through Ruby, this small town Missouri boy found his way into the wider world of San Francisco. And all of a sudden, that nerdy little kid who never really felt like he belonged anywhere found a home. Ruby's been this for many people, and it will still be for many more to come. I wasn't alone in this journey. Across the world, people from small towns, from non-traditional backgrounds, from industries that had nothing to do with technology whatsoever, they were finding their way to programming through Ruby. The community didn't just tolerate diversity, it celebrated it. But that feeling of magic came with attention. That was not always a good time, and sometimes that happened to turn to mockery. It's a toy. It's not serious programming languages. I mean, real companies use Java and C#, and real developers are serious business professionals doing serious business professionally work, not these whimsical hipsters from Seattle with their cartoon foxes. Using Ruby and Rails in some circles was the cause of a lot of ridicule and gatekeeping. The tools that allowed us to make our dreams real became lightning rods for criticism and mockery. I remember being told more than once I would never be a real developer if I only knew Ruby, that I needed to learn something serious. And honestly, that made me feel I didn't belong in the industry. And I'm sure it was the same for many of you back then. The harm this caused was immeasurable, and the number of people that left the industry as a result of it, uncountable. What gave us a sense of joy, a sense of wonder and excitement, started to feel like a curse that we would never truly belong. But who gets to decide that? Who gets to say what real means? The same voices that always decide, voices that sound remarkably similar to each other, in fact. It wasn't ever about technical merit. It was about maintaining hierarchies and ensuring that those who held power continued to do so. The critique often came from people who had invested years learning complex enterprise system frameworks, who had built their identities around mastering difficult tools. Ruby's simplicity was not just a technical threat. It was an existential one. If programming could be joyful and accessible, what did that say about all the suffering that they had endured to get to where they are today? Sure, there are some technical points to be made, lessons to be learned, and a lot of growth for these new Ruby developers. But in that hostile framing, the broader community had ensured that no Ruby developer would ever listen to them. Why would you pay attention to someone who's mocking you constantly? And what happened is they would preserve alone. They would find their own paths. And again, the technical criticisms weren't wrong. Ruby was slower than Java. Rails applications could become unwieldy without discipline. Monkey patching could create mysterious bugs, to which we're still finding some of those today. But these technical issues became weapons in a larger cultural war about who belonged in programming and who didn't. Because of our belief, because of our insistence that we, in fact, belonged, we continued onward, learning all the while, finding the shortcomings and limits of our tools and working to patch them as we went. We endured, but not all of us made it. Because not every struggle was technical. For every success story like mine, there were those who gave up, who decided maybe they really didn't belong, who let the mockery convince them that their joy in programming was somehow illegitimate. We lost brilliant minds to that gatekeeping that had nothing to do with technical merit and everything to do with cultural exclusion. And that is a tragedy. Now, that very struggle for those who held on became a foundation because, in a sense, to struggle is to learn. But learning, it's never that straightforward a path. I mean, it would be beautiful if it was, but I've never found that to be the case. In fact, it's a little bit something more like this, full of twists and turns, ups and downs, and all manner of struggles we can't even imagine. We learned and we grew, whether from critique or whether from our own lived experiences. Our frameworks matured, our knowledge grew, and in a strange sense, that very chaos from the early days acted as a forge to help refine us as programmers. We refine these learnings into new tools, practices, guidelines, lessons, and more. We constantly evolved from the supposed toy of early days to a mature framework with a wealth of investment in it. The community responded to criticism. It didn't respond with defensiveness. It responded with improvement. We built better testing frameworks like RSpec. We created conventions that made Rails applications more maintainable. We developed development tools that made scaling easier. We turned our pain points into opportunities for innovation. The secret? All of that struggle, the difficult debugging, the searching, all the hard problems were the very basis of learning on the path to mastery that created the world we live in today. There are no shortcuts on that path, only hard-earned experience built over the course of years. Every production outage taught us about monitoring and alerting. Every performance problem taught us about database optimization and caching. Every security vulnerability taught us about input validation and authentication. The struggles weren't obstacles. They were the curriculum. Now, that magic may have had a cost, but in paying that cost, we became stronger for it. We learned that magic without discipline becomes chaos. We learned that community without standards and guidelines and conduct becomes dysfunction. We learned that growth requires both support and challenge. These weren't just technical lessons. They were life lessons that made us better developers as well as better people. But we have to acknowledge something here for a moment, is that not only the good, but also the bad, because not all struggle is good, and the Ruby community had several to contend with. So should we all suffer endlessly just for the sake of appeasing some arbitrary struggle quota that makes us real developers? No, not at all. It's the job of leaders to identify such issues in tedium and eliminate them, to take the wheel and lower the barrier of knowledge for those who come after. That's why we have communities and resources, why we invest in bridges to ensure that the struggles of the past are not replicated into the future. We stand on the shoulders of giants who have, over the decades, collectively lowered the barrier of entry for the next generation. The best parts of the Ruby community were always about eliminating unnecessary friction. We built gems to solve common problems. We wrote documentation to share knowledge. We created tutorials to help newcomers. We understood that some struggles were educational, but others, just a waste. Be done with them. But some struggles were not just about learning. Over time, cliques emerged, and the doors that were meant to be open sometimes closed. If you didn't fit a certain mold, say the right things, or please the right people and defer to them, you might very quickly find yourself on the outside looking in. Some turned communities' openness into something far more exclusive. The very values that celebrated kindness, inclusion, and empathy weren't always practiced by those who preached them. Technical communities, Ruby included, are a collection of people with complex dreams and desires. We're still human after all, and humans are wonderfully messy and complicated creatures, and that's the beauty of it. We need to remember that in our love for Ruby, we also remember to love each other and extend grace, seeking first and foremost to understand and most notably to listen, especially to those who are very different than us. A lesson that is particularly relevant you'll find today. But that brings us to new magic. We find ourselves at the precipice of a new world with the promise of a new kind of magic. Entire applications in a weekend, new and novel solutions to problems and connections we'd not really considered before. Weeks of work reduced to days, and what felt impossible to a person with no programming experience whatsoever now felt just a bit more realistic. This new tool, AI, is showing us that same feeling of magic we once felt with Rails, the ability to manifest our dreams into reality, and all the possibilities that entailed. The parallels are striking. Just as Rails gave us wings and showed us we too could create, AI is giving that dream to a whole new generation of both programmers and non-programmers alike. But something feels familiar here now, doesn't it? Those of us who've seen it, who've used it, especially around vibe coding, are subject to extreme ridicule and a very, very familiar dismissal. They'll never be true programmers. They don't belong here. They should be mocked and dismissed as not serious about our industry. How dare they pretend to be one of us? How dare they try and take shortcuts to all that hard-won knowledge that we have? The echoes are unmistakable, and the irony palpable as many, even in the Ruby community, join in. Just like in the early days of Ruby, there are indeed dangers. In things AI lets us skip learning in favor of trusting, perhaps too much, those same AI tools. The question then becomes, how much of this is similar? How much is distinct? And what can we learn from our own journey through that first magic? The technical concerns are real. AI can generate code that looks correct but contains subtle bugs. It can create security vulnerabilities. It can lead to cargo cult programming where people just copy patterns without really understanding them. These are legitimate worries that deserve serious discussion, and there are many more than I have time to possibly even begin to cover today. But there's an interesting detail here that we need to take note of. Notice who tends to be criticized for using shortcuts and who gets praised. Who is seen as cheating versus who is seen as being productive. The benefit of the doubt is not always evenly applied, and some will far more frequently be asked to prove their worth. I'll give you a quick hint right here. It's not folks who look like me. It has a very real impact on those who get recognized, promoted, given opportunities, and even who is welcome in our industry. The pattern here is always the same. A new tool emerges, some embrace, some abuse, others resist. The people who are already established in the industry get to be thoughtful early adopters, while newcomers get labeled as cheaters and not real programmers. This isn't just about AI, it's about who gets to define legitimacy in our industry and how those definitions are used to include or exclude people from opportunities. Now, just as with Ruby, AI certainly has problems, and including its central paradox, it promises to make us more productive, but we have to realize a very central truth. AI cannot learn for us. When I was struggling to learn programming, I spent hours debugging .NET compiler errors, wrestling RPG on AS400s. By the way, I'm not nearly as old as that statement implies. Fighting CGI scripts. It was frustrating, but each struggle taught me something about how computers actually worked. AI can eliminate much of that friction, absolutely, that's a wonderful thing, but at what cost? What do we lose by making that trade? There's a difference between having access to information and developing understanding. AI can give you an answer, but it can't give you the intuition that comes from working through the problem yourself. It can show you the pattern, certainly, but it can't teach you when and how to break that pattern. AI cannot learn for you. It can only deliver answers, and it's exceptionally hard to know the difference between what is correct and what is merely a very convincing approximation. Now, this is particularly challenging for people early in their careers. How do you develop judgment if you've never had to exercise it? How do you build debugging skills if you never encounter bugs until it's way too late? How do you learn to read documentation if AI always gives you a pre-prepared answer? As we begin in our journey, it appears as an accelerant to manifest our dreams, certainly, but without stopping to consider, to check our footing, we may be running very fast and not noticing that we're running right off the side of a cliff. With Rails, we could see the code, understand the abstractions, peek under the hood when things went wrong. With AI, we're dealing with black boxes, trained on data we can't inspect, making decisions through processes we don't fully understand. But here's what I've learned from my own experience. AI works best when you already know enough to evaluate its output. It's a force multiplier for those with expertise, but not a replacement for it. The question is, how do we help people develop expertise in an AI-assisted world? Now, it should also be recognized that AI has a very real debugging problem. Kernighan's Lever by Brian Kernighan stated at one point that to debug code is twice as difficult as it is to write the code in the first place. Therefore, if you write code as cleverly as possible, you are by definition not nearly smart enough to debug it. Ask me how I know. I have a lot of fun stories about that. So combine that with AI-generated code that's just beyond our capacity, that may or may not be entirely correct, and we're not quite sure, and your requisite wariness should grow with it. I wouldn't say it's 2 times, it's more 3, 4 times if you happen to be lucky. Rails accelerated us, sure, but it also launched us into much harder problems much earlier. AI introduces us to problems even more complex than that, and we'll find ourselves very ill-equipped to handle them. We must be careful not to generate code far beyond ourselves and to make sure to understand what is being written rather than fully trusting without verification. I've seen this pattern repeatedly. Developers use AI to generate sophisticated algorithms they don't really fully understand. They spend days debugging issues because they don't comprehend what and why it made certain decisions, or what trade-offs it happened to make, or why exactly it got to that solution in the first place. The time you end up saving in generation ends up being lost many times over trying to debug it, especially as soon as you put it into pull request review. Now, these areas of knowledge are not limited to code, though. AI is an amplification. You are what you eat, in a sense. And if AI consumes biased information, it will not only reproduce it, but scale it, automate, and amplify it in such a way that it sounds objective and semi-neutral. For the vulnerable, this can mean higher incarceration rates, deadly encounters, job rejections, housing denials, and more. Something very, very familiar from the days of old, and even the modern day, honestly. AI does not absolve us of underlying bias, it amplifies it. So ensure to validate not only the complexity of your code, but the presence of bias and what might be introduced into it. The scale is what makes the difference from previous technologies. When a human makes a biased decision, it may be affected a couple of people at a time. With technology, it can affect millions of people simultaneously. And with AI, we might not even know what biases are being added. The responsibility we bear as developers has never been higher than this moment. But before we get too caught up in the dangers, let's remember something important. Not all struggle is created equal, and we learned this with Rails too, because Rails had scaffolds. Remember scaffolds? Generators? They eliminated a lot of drudgery of writing the same CRUD boilerplate over and over and over and over again, which we are very familiar with from older frameworks. And it freed us to focus on the interesting problems, the parts which were actually going to tangibly improve the business and improve people's lives. We didn't call it cheating, we called it smart back then. AI, in some sense, is a new variant of a generator, but just as with scaffolds, that comes at a cost. The key is knowing the difference. Just as it was with Rails scaffolds, use AI to skip the parts you already understand so you can spend more time on the parts you don't. Let it handle the boilerplate so you can wrestle with the architecture. But who gets to make the determination? Who gets to decide what counts as drudgery and what counts as a formative struggle? Who gets the grace to experiment and who gets judged for taking shortcuts? Used wisely on problems within your wheelhouse, AI is absolutely a force multiplier. Used carelessly on problems beyond your understanding, it becomes a trap. But the bigger trap is letting the same voices that have always decided who belongs continue to make those decisions for us as we enter this AI era. The goal isn't to eliminate all struggle, it's to eliminate unnecessary struggle so we can focus on the struggles which actually teach us something. AI can help with that, but only if we're thoughtful about how we use it. Which brings us to the next section of what it means to lead. So how then do we choose to lead in this new generation? How do we not repeat some of those same mistakes? AI is in fact our leadership moment. Every transformative technology creates that leadership moment, a chance not to shape just how technology is used, but how our communities grow around it. We're in that moment again with AI. The question isn't whether AI will change our industry, it's whether we'll lead that change or simply react to it. And we who remember the first magic have something unique to offer. We know how to lead with empathy, not just expertise. The moment's come, whether we're ready or not. Our junior engineers are already using it. They come out of college knowing it. Our executives already have abundant, strong opinions about it. Will we go into those interactions ill-equipped, not ready, without any information to save us, without even a life jacket? Or will we take charge? Will we abdicate the role of leadership, letting others make decisions for us? Or will we drive the change we want to see in this industry? This is where our experience with Rails becomes invaluable. We've seen how a transformative technology can reshape the industry for generations afterwards. We've seen how communities can either embrace change thoughtfully or resist it destructively. We've seen how leadership, or lack of it, can determine whether innovation lifts everyone up or leaves people behind. The stakes are now higher because AI's impact extends far beyond our industry. The decisions we make about how we integrate AI into our development practices today will influence how it gets integrated into society tomorrow. Now, there's a lesson I learned once from Kelsey Hightower about how we should approach new technology because it sticks to me to this day. It was to lead by doing. You see, his lesson was to lead from the front. The most effective way to lead is not from the sidelines. It's to jump in, to get your hands dirty, to guide others as you go, to form your own opinions as you're going along. When he explored new topics, he didn't just opine. He wrote documentation. He built things. He broke things. He shared the entire journey, mess and all. With AI, this means experimenting openly. I'd recently used AI to automate away 6 months worth of testing work across 30 teams of 5 different organizations, all in about a week. That would have been otherwise impossible. It probably would have taken me 6 to 8 months minimum if I was so lucky managed to negotiate that. Instead of just announcing it, I leveraged that to share the entire process, the prompts which worked, the far more abundant ones which did not work, the edge cases it missed, all the manual verification, every issue that I happened to encounter on the way. The key was being transparent about both the successes as well as the failures. I documented the times AI-generated tests caught real bugs that I didn't actually think about, but also the times it generated tests which gave me a lot of false confidence. I shared productivity gains, but also the new categories of problems that were likely to emerge whenever a junior opened a pull request I wasn't paying attention to. Transparency matters because your team is already experimenting with these tools. The question is whether they're going to be doing it in isolation, hiding behind closed doors, making mistakes you'll never have visibility to, or whether you've created a culture and environment where people can openly fail and learn. We gain credibility through being authentic and being approachable by giving others permission to do the same and bringing AI into the sunlight along with it. This approach builds trust in a way that mandates and policies never can. When people see you wrestling with the same challenges they're facing, when they see you making the same mistakes and learning from them, they're more likely to come to you with their own questions and concerns. The goal isn't to become an AI expert, it's not to have all the answers, it's to be the person who created enough space for everyone to feel comfortable and help them use AI responsibly. Now, while I was still at Square, I asked Angie Jones why she chose a leadership role over a technology I quite frankly strongly disagreed with. And she taught me something incredibly insightful about leadership. She taught me what it meant to steer the ship. She said that it is up to us as leaders to grab the wheel and steer the ship, especially around emerging technologies and controversial technologies entirely because we do care about the outcomes and the consequences of its use. If we're concerned about wise leadership, but we abdicate the role and say we're too good for that, well, who do you suppose takes up that mantle after us? Leading from the front means building credibility and knowledge to chart a course into a safer future that people can believe in and establish a culture which reinforces it. This means making hard decisions about which AI tools to adopt, how to integrate them into our workflows, what standards to set for AI-generated code, output, evaluations, and everything else. It means having difficult conversations about bias, about job displacement, about the changing nature of software development work. When your CTO asks about AI adoption, when the CEO wants to know about productivity gains, when the board asks you about competitive advantages, you need to have thoughtful, informed answers that come from a place of experience. Not just technical opinions, but insights as how these tools actually work in practice, what risks and trade-offs exist, and how you're going to manage them. You're not just managing teams here, you're shaping an entire generation of developers and how they'll think about these tools and how your organization will compete in this new AI-driven world. The alternative is letting others make these decisions for us, people who may not understand the technical implications, who may not care about the human impact, who may not share our values about what good software development looks like, who may not care about empathy and inclusion. We have the expertise and experience to guide some of these decisions thoughtfully. The question is whether we'll step up to do it. Now, during my time at Gusto, there was an issue with AI cheating on interviews, which I'm sure several of you are very familiar with at this point, and a concern of how the heck do we approach it? My answer was not really what folks expected. I said simply, let them. Let them use AI as much as they want in interviews. Let's expose it to the sunlight. Now, that got about the reaction you would expect it would. Our goal with interviews, if we get down to it, is not to teach on a quiz show. It's not to teach whether or not you've memorized all 20,000 algorithms from LeetCode. It's to test, are you a software engineer who can reasonably evaluate problems, express yourself, and work through solving? By bringing AI to the forefront and allowing it to use, you gain novel insight into how they approach problems in this world, including whether or not they blindly copy things they don't know how to explain. If they happen to be solid in explaining things and getting through a problem quickly, well, that just means you created variants and harder problems to continue the exercise. A good problem is not vulnerable to AI, it thrives on it. LeetCode suffers entirely because it relies on tricks and patterns rather than systemic solutions and nuance, which one might actually see in their real jobs, which is a very novel concept for coding interviews. Now, we want to interview the whole person, including any tools and aids they might use, any documentation they resource, anything they happen to use, rather than an arbitrary set of restrictions which deny us critical insights. We want to know how they respond to uncertainty, growing complexity, variance, and how they solve those really difficult problems. That's what we're after. And in a way, AI is forcing us to clean up interviewing to focus on precisely this, the actual value proposition of what makes a software engineer. Now, ironic how so much of AI and its enablement are foundational things we should have been doing anyways in technology, such as documentation, testing, system syncing, clear product descriptions, and a few more things you might recognize. AI is, in a way, sunlight highlighting our gaps in these areas and actively invites investment from leaders into them. Now, this principle extends beyond interviews. Instead of banning AI or pretending it doesn't exist, we should bring it out into the open where we can discuss it, where we can learn from it, develop best practices around it. Our goal is not to eliminate it from our workflows, it's to integrate it thoughtfully with full awareness of both its capabilities as well as its limitations. Now, the most powerful leadership opportunity with AI isn't using it yourself, it's growing others through AI. Now, just the same as with interviews, if a junior developer brings you AI-generated code they don't understand, that's not the problem to solve. It's a teaching moment to embrace. Ask them to walk through the code. Try and identify what they understand, what they don't. Help them learn the missing parts, and then bring them back into reality to where they can use that as a teachable moment. Use AI as a catalyst for deeper conversations about architecture, about trade-offs, about how you approach problems, about how you should think about them, and how you think about design. Create safe spaces where people can experiment without judgment. Host hackathons, builder days, and learning sessions. Allow them to fail and fail fast, celebrating that learning along the way. Your role is not to play AI police, but to guide others to develop strong and independent judgment, which is crucial for their growth as engineers. By helping others grow through using it, you're building trust with them, while also building collective wisdom and leadership capabilities as they then go on to emulate that same behavior as they grow. We create a virtuous cycle by embracing the ability to fail, the ability to be wrong, the ability to ask questions and say, you know what, I don't know what that does. This is our moment to lead, not by building walls, but by opening gates and teaching others how to approach this brave new world safely. Just like we did with Ruby and Rails, with empathy, patience, and hard-won wisdom that can only come from living through this transformation once before. The developers we mentor today are going to become the leaders of tomorrow. The culture we create around AI now will shape how the next generation approaches these tools. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to get this right. Which brings us to some of our closing on the Ruby lens. So here we stand at another crossroad with another magic in our hands. How we choose to respond to it will define a generation, so we must always remember and orient towards the Ruby way. We who remember the first magic, we who lived through dismissal, mockery, and struggle, we have something precious to offer in this moment. We have perspective, we have empathy, we have the hard-won wisdom that comes from being on both sides of this equation. We know what it felt like to be told our tools aren't serious, our approaches aren't valid, our contributions don't matter. We remember that sting of gatekeeping, the frustration of being excluded from conversations about quote-unquote real programming. But here's what made the difference. We didn't respond with gatekeeping. We didn't build higher walls and create more exclusive clubs. Instead, we opened our doors wider. We made our communities more welcoming, not less. We chose kindness over superiority and empathy over ego. And that choice, that fundamental orientation towards inclusion rather than exclusion, is what made Ruby special. Not just the syntax, not just the frameworks, but the people and the culture we built together. Now, as we watch a new generation discover their own magic through AI, we have a choice to make. Do we become the gatekeepers that we once faced? Do we dismiss their tools as toys, their approaches invalid, their contributions as somehow less than? Or do we remember who we are? Do we remember that magic, real magic, isn't about the tools we use, but about what we create with them and how we treat each other along the way? The Ruby way has always been about people first. Code is for humans. Happiness matters. Kindness is not a weakness, it's a strength. These aren't just platitudes, they're principles that built one of the most enduring, beloved communities in technology. That ethos, that compass, is what we need now more than ever. The technology will continue to evolve, the tools will change, the frameworks will come and go, but the values we choose to embody, those will determine whether we build a future that lifts everyone up or leaves people behind. Ruby is not just for Rubyists. Programming is not just for programmers. They're for everyone. AI is a movement, and Ruby's role in it will be written by everyone who joins. The moment we close the door, we stop being leaders. And when leaders choose walls over welcome, they trade vision for fear. And fear has never built a future worth following. Those who lead with fear don't defend a future, they abandon it. So, as we start to close, let me leave you with the 4 lessons we've explored today. First, struggle is learning. The chaos and challenges we faced with Rails weren't obstacles to overcome. They were the very foundation of our growth. Every debugging session, every production outage, every moment of frustration taught us something we couldn't have learned any other way. Second, AI can't learn for us. It can accelerate work, inspire new solutions, can help us tackle bigger problems, but it cannot replace the deep understanding that comes from wrestling with concepts ourselves. Used as a powerful tool, but never as a substitute for thinking. Third, we must lead from the front and take charge of this moment to charter a course in the future we want to see by creating a culture which reflects these very values that we so deeply admire. We must bring AI into the sunlight and use it to grow others through conversation and mentorship. Fourth, we must never forget kindness is our compass. In a world where technology changes rapidly and new tools are emerging constantly, our values are what keep us grounded. The empathy, inclusivity, and human-centered approach that made Ruby so special, these are not outdated concepts. They're more important now than ever. The magic we're witnessing today with AI is real, just as the magic we felt with Rails was real. But magic without wisdom becomes chaos. Magic without empathy becomes exclusion. And magic without leadership becomes dangerous. We who remember the first magic have a responsibility, not to gatekeep the new magic, but to share what we've learned to help others navigate the perils we've already faced, to ensure that this new wave of innovation lifts everyone up, not just a select few. There are lessons we can learn from the past, but we must reach beyond and lead into the voyages ahead. The future is not just something that happens to us, it's something we choose to create together. But before we sail into that future, let's remember our compass to stay kind, to stay curious, and never forget the most powerful magic of all is what we can accomplish together. The Ruby community taught us that technology is at its best when it serves people. As we navigate this new age of artificial intelligence, let's carry that lesson forward. Let's build tools which make people happy. Let's create communities that welcome everyone. Let's write code that makes the world just a little bit better. Ruby's magic has always been that anyone, artist, teacher, newcomer, wanderer, musician, you name it, they could create, they could come, they could find home. We came from everywhere, and that we built something beautiful. Our community has never been about defending borders. It has been about erasing them, about making space where others said there was none. And in that spirit is what made us powerful, and it's what we must carry forward. But there are voices, loud and familiar, that tell us communities are stronger when they're homogenous, that belonging must be earned through some novel concept of birthright or likeness. But that isn't strength. That's fear wearing a mask. It's the same fear that fuels nationalism, exclusion, racism, the fear of others. We know better. We have lived the proof that diversity is not a threat to magic, it is the magic. Ruby's legacy is not one of gatekeeping, but of courage. The courage to keep the door open when everyone else would dare to slam it shut. Fear builds walls. Courage builds worlds. Let's choose courage and say that yes, you in fact are welcome here. Thank you.